Hey everyone, welcome back to The Lookout. Glad to be here with you again. Today we're going to talk about several different fires. We're going to talk about there's new fires. Been listening to the radio all afternoon, and so I got that fire radio buzz going on. Had the Ponderosa fire today in Yuba County, which really got hit incredibly hard with aircraft, which is what happens here in Yuba County. We've got the Gifford fire, which is still doing all kinds of interesting things. And then we also had a couple other small starts that didn't really amount to much, so we'll check in on those too. But today the big deal this afternoon was the Ponderosa fire. And Yuba County's, if you're not from around here, not from around these parts, Yuba County is close by. It is like Butte County's poor relation, which is saying something. And worked a ton down there. I wrote a fire plan for Yuba County foothills in 2014, and so I got to spend a good amount of time up there with my mentor, Barry Kallenberger. We worked on it together. We drove around. We drove every kind of drivable road that we could find in Yuba County without getting shot at. That was kind of the heyday of the medical marijuana boom, and so driving around these foothill roads is exciting sometimes, and sometimes just not fun. So why does Yuba County have a fire problem? Well, Yuba County has got great conditions for growing vegetation, and they're also super poor, and so the county historically has let people build wherever the hell they wanted. So that means developers just kind of in the 70s and 80s just carved the place up in little crappy roads everywhere, and all kinds of subdivisions of ill repute, just funky. So this is kind of like the back door into one of the kind of an area that a lot of people live in. And so if this just looks like pretty green forest and a fun place to live, call me before you go house shopping. Anyway, this is Yuba County. What's happening here? Let's just stop and talk about fuels. We got Ponderosa pine here. Pine kind of doesn't grow until you get some decent precipitation and decent soils. And pine likes to grow in places that are really productive. Hot in the summer, moist. Just when you see Ponderosa pine, you know you've got good soil for forestry. It also likes to grow where you've got manzanita, and right here you're kind of on this transition in Yuba County where you go from kind of, it's just like everywhere in California, you go from the blue oak woodland up into the kind of live oak scrub with gray pine, and then you get into Ponderosa. And kind of along the margin where those all come together, you've got kind of the worst fuels in the world. The gray pine are super volatile. The live oak don't burn that often, but when they do, they can burn like crazy. And then all of these pine needles fall down out of these gray pine, and they fall into this brush, and they make this fuel type called needlecast brush, which is notoriously bad for firefighting. And then also, when you've got needlecast brush, it can torch up. You've got this kind of continuous fuel bed that we've talked about, and it goes up here and it torches and it throws spots everywhere. So this is a real typical Yuba County foothills vegetation. And when you get into the pine, it starts to like get noticeably cooler, and so it's a nice place to live because there's shade, and it's more temperate than the valley, and it's more temperate than lower in the foothills. But you have a lot of this, and so there hasn't been. CAL FIRE is incredibly effective at putting out fires in Yuba County. Yuba County kind of sits between. It sits right down in here between Grass Valley and Chico, and what happens, what we know about both those places, if we're good fire nerds, is you've got air attack bases in Chico and Grass Valley. So right here in the middle, you're right between two air attack bases, so there's 4 planes always there that can come and put out fires here right away. And then just right down the road here, and all these yellow dots are structures, and then right down here in Sacramento, you've got McClellan, where we fly the big C-130s and jet DC-10s and everything, mega tankers out of. they pretty much don't even have to turn. It's like, here you got McClellan, and you fly straight out of McClellan, and you barely have to turn. You drop on the fire, and you go back to McClellan. So those things have all worked together to really limit the number of large fires in the Yuba County foothills. And so we saw that in effect today. We had a fire that burning, probably in a place that looks a lot like this. And you got all these really cool homesteads out here carved into this kind of vegetation nightmare. So zoom in here on Ponderosa Fire, and these people out here in this particular neighborhood have big greenhouses. Curious what they're growing out there in the hillbilly brush with their big greenhouses. But anyway, this fire started right at one of these hillbilly greenhouses, and so about an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago, it was about 85 acres. So, man, so you've seen these big population changes in Yuba County with the legalization or quasi-legalization of the cannabis, starting with Prop 215, where medical marijuana was quasi-legal. So none of this stuff is really super legit, legal or not. There's a lot of just super sketch whack shit happening up here in the foothills. I was just listening to like the fire radio all day, and you hear like, oh, there's a stabbing over here, and someone drowned, and oh, they're not dead. Car wreck, someone else got beat up. Just like, man, I feel for the dispatchers, because, man, listening to the fire radio all day, it's hard to find fire radio that doesn't have all the other carnage going on. Anyway, that's the commentary. Is if we look at the fire now, just to kind of give you a little regional perspective, if you're out there and worried about where it's going. Right now, the fire's kind of died down, and they really knocked the hell out of it, and that's good, because if the fire does go uphill and become established, you got Challenge in Brownsville, about, 4 or 5 miles to the north. Actually 10. So you got a lot of folks living out in these kind of pretty thick kind of forest mix here. You're a little higher, you got more black oak, but not good spots for fire anywhere in the Yuba foothills. What has happened in Yuba foothills that's been great to see was in 2014 we wrote a fire plan for them, and we recommended a ton of projects, and we're really used to doing these fire plans, and you recommend a bunch of projects and then nothing happens, and then you come back 10 years to update it, and you're like, well, why don't you just do what we said to do 10 years ago? Not the case in Yuba County. Their fire safe council has been incredible there, and the private timber companies, Chai Company, Solar Brothers, Soper Wheeler, in the last decade, they've done a ton of thinning around a lot of the lands around the communities up here. So it's still a really dangerous place to live, but they've been taking huge efforts in this county to try to reduce fuels. The problem is just that this place grows fuels like crazy. It's one of those places that's got that intersection of precipitation, sunlight, fertile soils, and it grows vegetation like no other place. So far so good. Good huge air attack on this fire today. The problem is lots of spots. And so if we look at the cameras for this fire from, let's just start kind of at the beginning. All right, so right off the bat, you see the fire within the first half hour has spots out ahead of it. So within an hour, they had 5 or 6 air tankers and 3 or 4 heavy helicopters on this fire, and it's amazing what aircraft can do. They have really pretty poor access here. There's kind of some crappy roads in from here, and then there's a decent ranch road in from this side, but the initial kind of access is poor. It took them quite a while to get resources in there, to get dozers on the ground. And then the engines and tenders and everything kind of bunched up, it sounded like on the radio. So, but in that time, the air show really kind of kept this fire in check. And so far so good. One thing we were talking about a little bit on Facebook tonight was just in doing these community wildfire protection plans, we do a lot of kind of analysis. So we created this document, and then the Fire Safe Council and their partners turned it into this website. I'll put it in the link. So if you really want to kind of look into, if you live in Yuba County, or if you live in Butte County, we do a lot of work in these fire plans to talk about the vegetation types, the land cover, the weather and climate. And then in here in particular, we talked about the winds. And so that's kind of one of the wild cards with the current fire situation right now, is if we look at this fire with north up, it kind of had a west wind on it, and it kind of ran cross slope. And if you look at the topography for where it could go, topography, if the wind hadn't been blowing across the slope, if the wind was blowing up the slope, the fire would be going more this direction. But when we look at the kind of historic weather and what happens here, is we're kind of in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains here. And turn off all these yellow dots. Oh, go away. Now I think I just choked my computer with a million layers. Stop that. Okay. So in the big picture here, we're in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. The crest of the Sierra Nevada runs up through here. Up kind of through Quincy, and so kind of from Kirkwood up Desolation Wilderness. So at night, all that air sinks down these canyons. And so all kind of down the Sierra, we get pretty decent downsloping winds. And so the fire, if you look at where it is now, we'd kind of expect that tonight you're going to get the strong downsloping winds. And so those are going to kind of turn what was kind of the heel of the fire more into the head. And so there's potential overnight for them to have problems kind of on this downslope side of the fire. And the folks who are out there on the fire, they know that, but these are the kind of local factors that really often affect firefighting tactics. Is, in general, we fight the fire from the heel towards the head, and a lot of this stuff might be kind of cooling off already and seem done, but overnight there's potential for these spots to become established and kind of to better establish the fire out in this area in here. So they're going to have some night dropping helicopters, which are really a new thing. They're really kind of a game changer for fire suppression, being able to kind of drop water on these spots at night. And they have a ton of resources on this fire. They almost have too many resources on this fire for its current size. It's an 80-acre fire, and they've got probably 30 or 30 fire engines. And so it almost becomes an issue of where do you put these dozers? Where do you put these crews? Is our fire big enough to really need 30 engines on it? So that's what I'd be looking out for overnight, is just that those downsloping winds are going to change the dynamics. It's not going to be the same fire in 12 hours or even in 6 hours as it is right now. So these graphs really show that phenomenon pretty well. This is Bangor weather station, and so these wind charts, basically what they do is I don't know if I can really blow them up here. These show the direction of wind and the proportion of time it's happening. So for this analysis, we said, show us the winds between July and October from midnight to 6 a.m. And it says, okay, well, 5% of the time the wind's coming from the east, 5% of the time it's coming from the northeast, 75% of the time it's calm, right? And that's kind of opposed to the afternoon winds, which are driven by the opposite effect of the wind rising up the mountains. So what we had today was, typical kind of not much wind at all, but it was kind of coming a little upslope and a little from the west. And if you move farther up into the foothills here, Pike County Lookout, you see a stronger kind of relationship there. That these are your afternoon winds, strong upslopes from the southwest, oftentimes as much as 8 to 13 miles an hour. And then your night winds are the same as what we see in Bangor, but at your higher elevation, and so you have more winds that are like actually 19 to 25 mile an hour gusts. So this weather station, this fire being between those two weather stations, means that one way or another they're going to have winds. They'll be stronger than Bangor. They'll be less strong than Pike County, and Bangor is kind of down here, and Pike County is kind of up here. So these are some of the really cool tools we have for understanding fire behavior. Is this incredible network of weather stations, and then you can pull up these weather stations, the fire weather stations, and you can look at the kind of average temperature, average relative humidity, average wind speed, and then also the wind gusts. And these are interesting, and that you can see that nighttime gust coming kind of between. You got the peak gusts in the afternoon, but you see there's also peak gusts, around 2 in the morning. So these are called RAWs, remote automated weather stations, and they're super useful for understanding that stuff. And if you want to dig into it, you can Google RAWs map or RAWs weather stations, and you can find the one closest to you. So we'll keep an eye on Ponderosa. Yuba County's a trip, and I think one thing I dwell on a lot about aerial attack and the effectiveness of air attack is that it's kind of just postponing the inevitable, right? The better we get at putting out fires with aircraft, the more the fuels are going to look like this. I mean, these fuels here are the result of us getting better and better and better at fighting fires over the last 100 years. And it's not supposed to look like this. This land is not supposed to look like, 80% dead material in your brush, because when you get a fire, this sprouts and you get a new crop of brush. So this fire history map kind of tells that story. All these places without color here are places we've put out large fires for the last 100 years. And then you get these fires down here, the Cascade Fire in 2017 that happened at night during the windstorm that caused the Tubbs Fire and the other fires in Napa County. And that burned hundreds of homes. And it came at night, and it killed several people. And so I feel like, these big air tankers kind of bring a false sense of security. They put out all the fires that they can, but then you get a fire like this, the Bear Fire of 2020, that burned 35 miles in a day under a strong east wind and killed 16 people and destroyed thousands of structures. So, air tankers save the day all the time, but they don't save the community. They're not making Yuba County safer in the long term. They're just kind of perpetuating the status quo. And it's kind of an impossible problem, because you're not going to let fires burn in Yuba County. You're never going to hear me saying they should manage that fire for resource benefit in Yuba County, because look at all these people who live out there. You'll hear me saying they should manage that fire for resource benefit in the Klamath, where there's no one living there, and you got 100 fire scars creating conditions that don't allow for another big fire. But this patch here of all this green that's unburned is going to fill in with another fire like this. And so I applaud the firefighting, and I'm not disappointed that this fire is getting put out. Small, but I still wouldn't go buy property in this area based on the fact that we have a new fleet of C-130 air tankers, because it's just kind of kicking the can down the road. What solution would I imagine in a perfect world? I think in a perfect world, we'd be living like hobbits up here. It's hotter than hell in the summer. Dig your house into the hill like an earthship. Get your buddy, the pot farmer, with his excavator to come dig you a big hole and build a concrete bunker. It doesn't have to be ugly. and be ready for fire. Have a place that you can stay safe, because it's bad, man. It's really bad. This area is really bad. But I mean, so is the entire kind of front country of the Sierra Nevada, all the way from Redding to Bakersfield. It's bad. There's just all these places, and air tankers keep postponing the inevitable destruction by fire, but it's coming, because it looks like this. And so if your neighborhood looks like this, these people, there's a lot of people done a ton of work to protect their places, and it adds up to being impactful. But there's also a lot of folks out there who have major problems that prohibit them from getting stuff like this done. You know, if you live out here and you have animals, you can graze this all down, and it's a really effective fire break. But you have to really kind of just anticipate that fire is going to come, and when it does, you hope that you've grazed your stuff down, you've cleared your kind of flammables and everything else out, and maybe it can be safe for you to stay there. You have sprinklers or whatever else. But it's a tough place just because the hazard is extreme, and you cut it and it grows back. So I do applaud all the work people are doing out there, but one of the problems with Yuba County and their lack of planning is when you have people living all over the landscape, you know, if the town has a defined edge to it, you can kind of concentrate on thinning around the edge of the town. But if you have people just living kind of scattered wherever because the county decided to let people subdivide however they felt was fit, it's really hard to come in and do like a community scale, like fuel break or something, just because the community has no real edge. It's just this kind of mishmash of people living on 5 to 20 acres with very little kind of design, you know. So if you look at a community like Nevada City or something, it's similar, but at least you have this like urban core where you can focus and say like, hey, we're really going to focus on this 100 acres and this 100 acres and this 100 acres, you know, because there's, you know, thousands of people living in a concentrated area. You can actually start thinking that way. But when you have people just living kind of scattered all over the map, it's hard to do kind of a cohesive kind of community plan. So what we said here in our fire plan that we wrote for them is just like really focus on clearing around people's individual structures and focus on empowering people to do their own work, because it's just really hard to kind of try to coordinate a big project across a whole bunch of different landowners that's going to buy kind of a regional scale level of protection. You know, if you look at kind of the parcels out here, there's just so many owners. You know, if I want to do a fuel break along this, you know, edge of here, it's like, well, I can work with a couple big landowners, but then I've got like all these other, you know, that you might want to do a project within a whole area, and you have to work with 100 different people. So it's too late to kind of unplan this. It is what it is. Omar is saying, what's the possibility of reaching Brownsville? I don't know. I don't think it's gonna. I think, you know, we don't have a lot of wind forecasts. They're on it. They've got a ton of resources. They don't have a lot of other competing needs right now for resources. Sounds like they've gotten all the resources that are available for them, and they'll put them to work, and I think that they're going to put it out. I think if the fire had started a couple hours earlier and there was a little more wind, it'd be a bigger problem, but right now I think Brownsville's looking pretty good. But keep an eye on it. It's a good reminder to have your stuff ready to roll when you live here. Okay, so anyway, yeah, it's a lot. I know I kind of bomb y'all with a lot of my opinion. I spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff, and spent a lot of time up there. And great folks working hard to try to do what they can. But when you have like this long history of poor planning and kind of anarchy and criminal activity and just a lot of the stuff that happens in the foothills, it's really hard to solve these problems. No, there's no simple solutions and no kind of feel good story necessarily. But there's lots of minor successes, and we want to try to tell those stories if we can. So anyway, that's Ponderosa fire. We had another start in Rackerby while this fire was going that diverted some air tankers for a little while. Don't think it turned out to be much, but it's right about here in the metropolis of Rackerby, which is also sketchy AF, people. Rackerby. Look at all those greenhouses. Good place to get stabbed. Don't go exploring down driveways in Rackerby. Butte County, baby. We got Butte County, Yuba County. We got we're hillbilly cousins. Poor relations. All right, there was another fire that started up by Coleman Hatchery. today up by Red Bluff. I don't have any mapping for that. It burned for a little while on the cameras and they put it out. That was up kind of north of Inskip Hill. And then there's another fire yet that started up by Little Valley, which is, we're on kind of the like just destitution tour today. Little Valley is like the hardest place I've ever seen, and I'm from Westwood, so that's saying a lot. Little Valley is broke place. Anyway, there's a low fire up there today. They got aircraft on it. It looked like on the cameras it was done pretty good. I wonder if Google Street View, it used to be the Google Street View drove into Little Valley and then they stopped. They didn't, like, the Street View driver didn't dare to drive around and see what was happening elsewhere in Little Valley, but I've driven through there a couple times and I didn't stop. Lassen County, baby, represent. So Little Valley, yeah, looks like Little Valley's got some little orchards right in town, and that's not easy. It's high elevation. It's like, I don't know if anyone knows this, but growing weed like above 4,000 feet is kind of like trying to be a gardener in Westwood, like growing, like you can mainly grow like leeks and cabbage. So these folks, I'd say they're to be commended for their alpine cannabis cultivation skills. But yeah, man, like where are we going next? Middle of nowhere. Anyway, Little Valley's up here between Bernie and Likely. All right, I'm on fire, people. Destitution tour. Oh yeah, so there were no fires in Lake County to report on, or we'd be kind of closing the ghetto triangle. All right, so Gifford fire. We're gonna talk about Gifford now. Got Santa Maria here and Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, and we got some fire lines here. So what's happening on Gifford? Gifford's gonna grow. We know that because they're gonna light it on fire. It's gonna grow on purpose. So let's see. Lake County got off easy tonight. What do we have to show you here on Gifford? We've got our progression map for Gifford. And Gifford really is kind of done for the most part on the south. There's a little bit of growth down there, really not much. And so for the most part, Gifford's most interesting happenings are now happening kind of northeast of Wasna, here in the Garcia Wilderness, not San anything. So let's turn on some layers here. Okay, so kind of to orient you, we've got San Luis Obispo, we've got Santa Margarita, we got the Cuesta Grade up here, and then we've got another one of these wilderness areas. What's going on here? Where's my ruler? Turn that off. So we got the Santa Lucia Wilderness, and then we got a kind of little alleyway between there, and then we got the Garcia Wilderness. And for probably lots of good reasons, Forest Service is not keen for the dozers to get in the wilderness area. So that constrains firefighting. In some ways, in other ways, it's not clear that dozers would have a lot of opportunity in here to corral this fire. But basically, what's happening on Gifford is it's burning kind of well established in the Garcia Wilderness now, and there's no real kind of easy way for them to get in there and put it out. They can't really use dozers, and if you look at where they might try to run dozers, a lot of these ridges don't really, maybe they could have come down this ridge here, and maybe they could have got some dozer line in here. Not guaranteed. So it's real rocky. It's just wild. It's wilderness. Not a lot going on out there as far as great firefighting opportunities, because this area has not burned for 100 years. So it looks a lot like those pictures I just showed you of Yuba County. And so the strategy now, and whoever drew these lines on the map looked like they're in a hurry. So the purple lines are basically kind of where they're planning to put fire line. Up here we've got Pozo, and here we've got a road that its name escapes me. Let me pull up my ops map. All right, so we've got Avenales Ranch Road, we've got Pozo up here, and then we've got the High Mountain Road, and that road kind of splits between the Santa Lucia and the Garcia Wilderness area. So basically the plan is they're going to fire out this whole box here, which is, I don't know, 10 to 15,000 acres. And even though the fire's kind of disappearing, let's pan up here a little. Okay, so Santa Margarita is way off the top here, and so yeah, the plan. Let's draw that again and make it so it doesn't disappear this time. The plan is to basically finish line around the entire Garcia Wilderness, and then kind of tie it into roads and other dozer lines down this way, and probably come all the way down to here and tie it back into the fire. Because even though the fire is kind of contained by dozer line up to here, there's no easy way. There's some deep kind of creeks and gullies out in here, and there's no easy way for them to kind of connect the part of the fire that's contained out through here, just because it's super rugged and deep and steep. So that's the plan basically, is they're prepping these lines, and they're going to use helitorches, which are basically invented for burning villages, to light all the brush. And they have to do that because they're normal, like ping pong balls. You've got all this decadent brush and not a lot of fuel underneath it because it's so old. And so if you drop the ping pong balls, they kind of just land on the ground. And ping pong balls are a firing device that we use with helicopters, that you have a ball that's got some powder in it, and you inject this like antifreeze in the helicopter, and then it drops and it spontaneously combusts when it hits the ground. So it's a firing device because it's not really super safe to, well, someone figured it out. And so they use them now with drones, but they're going to do this with a helitorch, and the idea is that they're going to kind of, let's change our color here. The idea is that they're going to kind of light the edges of this on hand, you know, by foot, and with a terra torch, which is like a flamethrower that you have mounted on a vehicle. And so they're going to make their way around the edge here, probably like starting Tuesday. They have a lot of prep work to do still. And once they have that edge kind of secured, light it and let it burn anyways and get some depth, then they come out here with their terra torch and they just light a bunch of stuff on fire, and it fills in, and theoretically this all ends out burnt, and then this is all black and the fire's done. It doesn't have anything left to burn. So big firing operation. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? Well, lots could go wrong. But I was on a project one time, and we had a rookie pilot, and we had a terra torch, and they're not cheap. And the pilot, he got flustered and he hit the little red button on his joystick, and he pickled the terra torch off into a gully. And luckily, the place where that happened it was kind of barren desert, and it didn't start a major fire outside of our operation. But yeah, when you start flying around with a helicopter raining napalm, who knows? Like, things can happen. So there's a big area. It's a lot of choreography. They have to do the work they can to prep. But also during that time that they're getting prepped and ready to fire it, it's like, well, this fire right now is kind of sleeping, but it might wake up and, you know, do this. So there's some sense of urgency to get the firing show initiated. The other thing that's kind of another bigger concern is this topography is, you know, they got to work with what they got. And so it might look easier on a flat map than it does on a map like this. So kind of another angle on what they're going to do here is, kind of light. They're going to try. This is the headwaters of the Salinas River here. This dry riverbed, and so they're going to try to light this in a way. They're not going to run dozers down the Salinas River. So, but maybe they can run dozers, down in here. But the same idea is they're going to light this edge, and then once it starts to burn in, then they're going to be lighting in here with their helicopter. Now, one thing that's kind of cool about this is once they get this edge secured, is they can light this ridgetop potentially and have the fire back down. And there's a lot of things they can do to kind of manipulate the fire effects. But when it comes down to it, if you've got, if you're in a hurry to light 10,000 acres on fire, you kind of create a dragon that can do what it wants. And so kind of the linchpin of this plan, or the tough part of this plan, like this side is pretty straightforward. It's oak woodland, it's grass. You light something, it burns for 5 seconds, and you can step into the black and it's done. So this is kind of like the dream firing operation. If you got favorable winds, you come out here and you light this off, maybe even from a moving vehicle, and you have people behind you, and it's like what we would do with prescribed fire all day long. So this part is kind of the more straightforward part to light. But the hard part over here is that in trying to thread the needle between these two wilderness areas, they've got to figure out how to put in fire line on this side and have that fire line be favorable for firing operations. So one idea is that they're going to bring dozers up as far as they can on this Trout Gulch Creek or something like that. So that's kind of in their plan right now, is this purple line would be drive the dozers as far as you can up this drainage until you kind of run out of geography where you can do that without being right in the creek, and then maybe tie it back up into here with a hand line, because there's like an old ridge there. So then you got these lines in, and you're like, okay, great, now we got these dozer lines, let's do our firing operation. But now you've got squirrely topography. Like, you might come in here and light this off here, and then you might get some strong west winds that blow down here, and then that part of the fire might just come back over here and run back this way. So this side of the fire is not straightforward at all. Constrained by the fact that they potentially have alignments for their lines here that would go into a wilderness area. So like theoretically, I'm going to turn off their crazy lines here. But in theory, if you had the perfect world and you were going to like plan out this firing operation, you might decide so there's just this linchpin here that there's no easy way for them to kind of prep a line that avoids this mid-slope alignment on this side of the fire. So they can, they can come in here and maybe run dozers on the edge of the wilderness. But then if they're not allowed to go in the wilderness at all, they can't kind of connect through here and down, whatever it would be. So the geography has got some real obstacles to them, and the weather right now. So just kind of, if you're just joining us, we're talking about the north end of the Gifford fire, and that the current plan is to do a major firing operation over the next week, basically, to kind of try to bring the fire, since they can't really fight the fire very well in their wilderness, to try to bring the fire out to roads and dozer lines and enclose it with fire lines that got fired, and this will all get burnt. But as we're saying, the linchpin is this flank of the fire is difficult and isn't set up for easy success for the firefighters. But that's basically kind of what's happening on Gifford. They've got this kind of chess game, and right now they're in a race with the fire to get fire lines prepped to do their firing operations before the weather changes. There's supposed to be some stronger winds towards the later part of next week, potentially Thursday, Friday. Potentially they're not going to have the prep ready to fire this until Tuesday or Wednesday. So we'll be watching it. We'll be reporting on it. It's this is the interesting and fun part of firefighting. You know, like there's a lot of people, smart people who have a ton of experience figuring this stuff out. But the difficult part is like, okay, so you go and you light this out here, and if it does escape up into here and eventually gets up to, you know, Santa Margarita, you can come in for criticism for, well, why did you light that? You know, say there's a wind event, you know, next Saturday that blows for 8 hours and the fire moves this distance from here to here and causes havoc on the 101. You could say, well, if you just left this burn, that and the fire was here instead of here, that same wind event, that 8-hour wind event, only would have brought the fire halfway there. So by moving the fire forward on purpose, you open yourself up to this liability. But that really, firing operations are how big fires get put out. There's very few, when you have a fire that's 100,000 acres, there's very few ways to put that fire out with water or airplanes or bulldozers. Like, big fires are put out by people lighting things on fire to deprive the fire of fuel. It's the way firefighting's always worked. Anyway, that's the story. Always thankful for friends in the know that give me a call. Couldn't do it without you guys. And if you want to help out the lookout, give me a call. Send me a line if you got something you think that's interesting that we should talk about. Our interest is in explaining what's happening and helping people understand what kinds of decision space the firefighters are in. We're not here to, you know, we try really hard not to criticize the tactics. You know, these are really complex operations. We try to educate people on it, and we don't burn our sources. So anything you tell me, anytime anyone wants to tell me some information, I'll never tell anyone else unless I ask you first. Unless you consider me telling everyone on the internet, but I'm not going to you know, we love people calling us and giving us good, solid, reasoned information. Thank you. So that's Gifford. Let's look a little at kind of current fire behavior and why it's doing what it's doing. This is the view from La Panza, where we've been many a day and night now. And interesting thing that happened today on La Panza was there was kind of a blow up here on this flank, a little slop over, and then that slop over stood up and did some burning. And we get to watch it on the camera. We get to see this guy's been up here all day. So as you see, it smoked itself out. And when we look at the other cameras, like Black Mountain here, it smoked. It started off, most of the afternoon it was just completely socked in on this camera, which is north of the fire. And then it cleared up a little in the afternoon, and you could see the fire kind of making a run off to the south. But what's happening with this fire basically is smoke shading is we've talked about it before. Smoke shading is a really significant factor in driving fire behavior. And so if we look at our weather here, you can see like the fire down here and the smoke all kind of just going out to the north and not really like spreading very fast or very far. And so that is basically shading itself out. You know, if the fire was getting more of a kind of northwesterly push, this would be kind of getting direct wind and no smoke. But as it is, this kind of like, you see the marine layer and it's kind of stable atmosphere, so these fires are kind of staying capped all day. And so it's subdued. You know, another thing that's happening is what we need to generate kind of big pyrocumulus clouds is we need lift. We need what we call like mixing height to be high. And so if you look at our forecast here, the mixing height is, Sunday the mixing height is 380 feet. Tomorrow the mixing height is going to be 10,000. So you can get a 10,000 foot smoke cloud tomorrow. Today you couldn't really get it because the mixing height and what we call the ventilation rate. These numbers are in red because if we're prescribed burning, we can't really burn when we have these low mixing heights and we've got these really poor vent rates, because it just means that we're going to smoke out everyone, and no one likes that. So anyway, that's one reason the fire's staying capped. So when you see that the mixing height goes up a lot, it means that the fire is going to be able to breathe well tomorrow. Now today they said that we had a kind of probability of unstable atmosphere, but that didn't really materialize. You can just see by what the fire did. So anyway, tomorrow's supposed to be like the hottest day. Humidities are going to be low. Not real strong winds, but still got that west wind. So the weather conditions are all there except for kind of the stability of the atmosphere. It's hot, it's dry, there's a little bit of breeze, but not much. But the atmosphere is just stable, and without that wind, the fire's really not doing much. So the thing to watch here on the forecast is just that instability building, the mixing rate going up, and the arrival of winds. So like I said, there's kind of some discussion in the forecast models a little ways out of us getting some more significant winds later in the week. And so it's kind of that ends out, things like that end up pushing the timing on a firing operation, where you're like, we wish we had another 3 days to prep the line, but the wind event's coming, we got to get it going. So a lot of these firing events, these firing operations are desperate measures, right? Like firefighters feel like we have to do something. We're firefighters, we're paid to put the fire out. And it kind of sucks for them because they get pressured into doing stuff that sometimes has a low probability of success. Like right now, this operation has decent probability of success if the weather holds. But if you step back at it and say, like, we get this tunnel vision. We say, like, I think if you rewrote the script and said, like, okay, say we're in a leadership class and I tell you, okay, tomorrow the forecast is going to be 103 degrees and the RH is going to be 13, and we don't know what the winds are doing in 2 days, but we think you should go light a 15,000 acre prescribed burn in an area that hasn't burned for 100 years. What do you think? Like, most of us would say, have you asked anyone else? I got to take my kid to soccer game, whatever. But because we're kind of under the pressure and these guys have been out for 2 weeks, somehow this is the best we can do right now. Is we're gonna take a helicopter with some village burning apparatus strapped on it, and we're gonna go light 15,000 acres on fire because we got to do something. So, and I'm not criticizing. This is just the way the game works. Basically, the reply would be like, well, if we don't do anything, what's going to happen? Like, maybe it'll burn Santa Margarita. Maybe it'll burn all the way to frickin' Cayucos, right? So on that tip, I want to kind of just talk about fuels some more. I'm trying to show more examples of fuels. And lucky for you, I travel with a camera, and I like using it. So we're leaving Yuba County, and now the destitution tour is over. Now we're in some really expensive real estate, and this is Cuesta Ridge. So here's the fire, here's the burn operation, here's San Lucia Wilderness, and then at the north end of the wilderness you get to 101. And if you get across 101, basically this video picks up right here on the Cuesta Ridge Road, going north from 101 up on this ridge line here. So a lot of this area burned in 1994 in the Highway 41 fire. And so what's that? It's 30-year-old brush, and it's kind of a mix of like chamise, which burns super well, ceanothus, there's cypress groves up here, but super similar to a lot of the areas that just burn like a total monster in the beginning phases of the Gifford fire, right? So the difference here is that on this side of the ridge, lower down, you got the coastal influence, but this is windy, exposed, continuous brush for miles and miles and miles. And right about now, my family's saying, "Dad, where are we going?" And then my wife's saying, "Are you really going to drive up that in our car?" And I was kept telling him, "It's worth it. No, I promise it's worth it." And then we got where we were going, and it was cool, but I mean, it wasn't that cool. Anyway, so this is Cuesta Ridge. This is just typical fuels, really similar fuels to what a lot of this fire is burned now. Regrowth from a fire. And this is what a lot of this area that's burning in the fire now is going to look like in 30 years. So this part here was really fun. And I was glad I wasn't passenger. So, right, so beautiful place, coastal influence. Right, so I talked to a buddy today who's a division supervisor on the fire, and he's like, "I don't know why we got to keep it out of the wilderness area. Like, everyone's so worried about us, getting out there with a bulldozer and maybe destroying like 500 acres. They'd rather see us burn it all and have like black sticks for a generation, have it be destroyed." And I didn't argue with them, but what I was thinking is like, this is all going to burn, and next year it'll be green, and 10 years from now it'll look like this, because this landscape it burns. It's what needs to happen here. And so it's not the end of the world for this all to burn, in my opinion. This is what happens. Like, there's nothing out in these landscapes that you're going to kill with fire, or it would be gone, because these areas have burned before. So this is basically but back to this kind of scenario of like, well, what happens with this burn operation? What if things go wrong? It's like, well, with continuous fuel and being where we are in the season, like, the fire could continue to do its thing. We could move it forward with our firing operation. It could move into here, and it could end up burning up here on Cuesta Ridge. So there's no simple answers. I think what I want people to know is just that, like, well, if it does burn on Cuesta Ridge, it's not destroyed. It's not the end of the world, but it is scary if you live in a place that has, that's close to here. I mean, when we look at the structure map here, like, it is freaking urban. Like, once you get in town, there's people living everywhere. So it's just the same story in a different geography. You got a lot of structures out on the edge of the wilderness. You got structures, developments out in the hillbilly sticks, and that's all weighing on the minds of the people that are trying to figure out how to do this. But they're also, informed by an identity that's like, we're firefighters. We're going to put the fire out. We're going to use the tools we have, and today that tool is a heli torch and a big firing operation. So there you go. Hey, Charles Brown, thanks for the props on my blacksmithing. Not a lot of blacksmithing going on in the metal shop when it's 105, though. Anyway, that concludes the structured portion of our lecture. I'm going to jump back and just kind of look at some webcams real quick of what's going on over here. Sorry, I decided I was going to try something new here with playing videos while I labor in the background, just so you don't have to watch me work. So this is prescribed fire we're doing in Butte County. And I'm going to kind of move my show over here for a minute. And you guys can check out Colin Ferguson. He's stoked because we brought fire onto his land, and we're burning right up against his house with a bunch of volunteers, Butte Prescribed Burn Association. So I'm just kind of pulling up some other cameras here to check on what if anything's going on with our fire in Yuba County. Someone's asking what you can do. This is something you can do in a lot of places. There's a lot of momentum right now towards putting fire on the ground. All these people here, most of them are volunteers. This is a little drip torch lesson. This is David Mitchell here, leader of our local Prescribed Burn Association. And this gal's using a drip torch for the first time. All right, I'm gonna come back to you here. All right, yeah, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot going on with the Ponderosa fires. Pretty subdued right now. Recommend checking out the webcams. If you, I'll put a link up here, but the webcams are just really a stellar resource for being a landlooker these days. And people are asking about Morro Bay. I can talk a little bit about Morro Bay. I did a video on it earlier this year, and I started my career working on a fire plan in Morro Bay, and so I think it's worth a little lesson. Let me queue up some maps here to talk about that. Yeah, so we haven't had a fire in Morro Bay for 30 years, so let me talk about that a little bit. I got a job kind of right when I started working as a fire contractor doing mapping on fires. Some of our winter work was fire planning, pre-fire planning. And so the Morro Bay Estuary Foundation is a nonprofit that basically you've got the estuary in Morro Bay, which is kind of this rare freshwater estuaries are this interesting mix of saltwater and freshwater habitats. And so there's a national estuary program that is kind of focused on the health of these kind of special estuary areas. Now, Morro Bay Estuary obviously probably used to be a lot bigger before they kind of pushed out Morro Bay and Baywood Park so into it. But basically it's got these kind of really cool channels, and it's got this rare like eelgrass or something. And it's just a really trippy, cool, tidal, ecologically rich area. And so in 1994, there was a big fire up here, the 41 fire, that started off of Highway 41, and it burned all the way to Santa Margarita and all the way to the other side of the Cuesta Grade. And it was a big deal, 50,000 acres, and it just kind of reset the clock on a lot of the chaparral on this ridge. And then there was sediment after that. There was storms, and there was runoff. and there was a ton of sediment that came down into the bay. And so the estuary people were worried about all that sediment, and so they hired us to do a fire plan to tell them how we could like reduce fire severity on the mountain to protect the estuary from sediment. And basically what we found was, well, you can't do that because this is a high severity fire regime, meaning that it doesn't burn often, and when it does, it burns everything down to the sticks and bare dirt. And that's just how it works. You're not going to stop that from happening. So we recommended at that time that they do some prescribed burns to kind of break up the age classes, because this is all like the same age brush. It's all the exact same age. And that never happened just because it's ambitious to tell people like, hey, you should go burn, 1,000 acres in the Coast Range here. Like, it's just no one's tooled up for that. And that was early in my career, and I was kind of naive, and I was like, oh yeah, just draw these things on the map. And someone will maybe do it. My boss, was old school, and he'd done a lot of burning with the BLM, and he's like, oh, here's how you do it. So none of that happened. But I think the most interesting thing about that project was what we kind of found was, or we recommended, is like, okay, well, the problem isn't that you've got brush and you're going to have sediment coming off the hill. The problem is that the channels here are all messed up from like agriculture and development. So like you get these creek channels, and they've been kind of levied and downcut because of erosion from poor grazing practices and everything else. And so the sediment that does come down the hill from these fires has nowhere to go. The reason that these flat areas exist is that in the past you'd have these big fires, and the sediment would come down and it would fill up these valleys. It would flow, the creeks would be high, and the sediment would go out and flood. So what we told the estuary people is like, well, if you're worried about sediment messing up your sacred estuary, like you should probably, instead of trying to keep the hills from burning, which is impossible, you should probably invest in like restoring these floodplains. And there's a lot of people who know how to do that kind of stuff. And if you can get reestablished floodplain, then the sediment would actually have somewhere to go when there's a storm. Instead, it's just kind of like these are basically like an irrigation canal kind of slough, and all that muddy water from the sediment is going to flush down into your sacred estuary. So I don't think that's happened, but I think it's kind of symptomatic of how people see fire. People see fire as this kind of problem to be solved, and it's kind of futile because these areas are going to burn catastrophically when they burn. And it's just kind of, it's just like Southern California. Like, this brush is going to burn on a windy day. You're not going to be able to stop it. That's the way these places are wired. And so, yeah, we can put in fuel breaks to try to make it easier to stop fires before they burn into a town. But we're not going to, like, change the ecology of these mountains to, like, suddenly not need fire or to kind of just not be hazardous, because it's just the DNA of these places that they've evolved with fire. It's California. Dave Vincent said that you used to be a ground pounder before getting into planning side. I was on a forestry crew. I worked for the Forest Service. I was on a forestry crew, so I had like a limited amount of ground pounding as kind of a member of the militia kind of district crew. But I've kind of come into operations through planning and also through prescribed fire. But I've never been like, I've never spent a full season on a hotshot crew or anything. I just have worked over the last 30 years for, my mentors were hotshot soups, and I've learned a lot of the operations stuff from either working on fires in the planning shop or driving around this landscape with people who, ran hotshot crews for decades and became ops chiefs, and I've just had some really good mentors on the operational side. But yeah, I don't claim to be, like 10-year hotshot or anything. All right. Sheila Brown says, from everything I've read, chaparral shouldn't be cleaned and burned often. 30 years between burns. This allows for a healthy seed bank and to keep invasive grasses and such out. And it's true. It's true. Like when we try to kind of manipulate, that's why prescribed burning isn't really the solution in a lot of these places. Because if we go in there too soon or we burn stuff, oftentimes it just comes back in weeds. So a lot of these solutions that we think we have other places, like thinning brush, masticating, prescribed burning, they're not as well suited for chaparral. And some people who kind of are trying to protect the chaparral have a legitimate beef with fuels management, because often that fuels management makes the problem worse. And we're going to talk about that in the third episode of our new series, Danger in Plain Sight. We talk about kind of fuels management around communities and the difficulty of doing stuff in chaparral. I think maybe one of the most important things people can take away from these broadcasts is that everywhere is different. Everywhere in California has got the Coast Range is different from the Sierra Nevada foothills, which is different from the redwoods, which is different from the mixed conifer, which is different from the red fir. Something that you hear about in Yosemite doesn't work in Paso Robles, and that you really have to kind of get nuanced, because I see a lot of people say like, oh, it should do more forest management. If Gavin Newsom did more forest management, we wouldn't have these problems. And then, like, you look at where we're talking about, and well, that's David Mitchell. That's not forest management. But that video I was just showing of Morro Bay. And it's kind of one of my pet peeves is like everyone's talking about forest management and how if we did more forest management and if we hadn't stopped all the logging, we wouldn't have these problems. And like, well, there's never been a timber industry in San Luis Obispo. There's no merchantable species here that would be worth logging. And you get a little farther up the road and like, what are we talking about with forest management? Are we supposed to like clear cut all this brush? Like, this is what Southern California looks like. So when you see like someone say like the LA fires were caused by poor forest management, you're like, what forest are you talking about? I don't see a single tree here for like 100,000 acres. We're not going to mow the brush for 100,000 acres to stop wildfires. So location matters, really does. Oh, there's a tree. It's like it's the first tree that we saw in like the whole drive. You gonna cut that tree down to stop the fires? Like, it's kind of ridiculous. So Red Ryan says chaparral equals forest. Well, if you're 2 feet tall, for sure. I think one of the reasons people think that is because we haven't had fire for so long. A lot of places the brush is as tall as trees. Looking like we got some good good comments. They can make it rain through weather manipulation, like they do all the time. Weather warfare, but won't. Yeah, there's another guy who's inventing this like jet engine that you haul around behind like a skidder that has like a mister and you blow the fires out. And he's looking for venture capital. So if anyone wants to get in early. All right, here we're getting into some forest. This is interesting here. This is the Cuesta Ridge Botanical Area, Sargent Cypress Groves. And if you want to hear more about this area, check out our video, Central Coast Road Trip video from February. Fascinating. Like the fire ecology of California, there's all these unique kind of spots where you can learn a lot and just blow your mind. So if you're liking this stuff, geeking out with me, you can study fire ecology. Take classes at Berkeley, Cal Poly, Humboldt. Chico State has wildland management masters, and pretty awesome. Okay, so commercial break. I'm kind of trying a new format here. I think a lot of podcasters or a lot of live streamers just talk, and I've often done that, but I think just freewheeling's like a new thing for me. Okay, but we got a new T-shirt design, and we're not down on Watch Duty. They're awesome, but we're putting our own twist on it. We got those, and then we also have this one. This is our new sticker. It's not that big, but which one would you guys like to see on the wall behind me? I'm gonna put one up for a while. I want to hear some comments of Squatch Duty or just Squatch. We're gonna be selling hoodies, kind of like this, nice hoodies, black hoodies for Christmas. Gonna start some pre-orders because it's gonna cost us a bunch of money to make them. But first funny comment, I'll put the one up you pick. All right, Squatch Duty, more color. Someone's asking if we can trim the veg like a beard. It's trimmed low. Well, that's kind of what mastication is. Kind of like bearding your forest. I think the problem is that problem with keeping it mowed low and slow and all that is the ground ain't conducive to management. If you look at like these places here, like it's some crazy mowing, and it's just thousands of acres we're talking about. So I don't know. I think manscaping the shrubbery around your town is great. And so when we talk about kind of where to spend money on fuels management, it's like first thing I like to do if I'm writing a fire plan is turn on my trusty structure layer, and it's kind of a no-brainer. You're like, where are the people? And since we know that most of California a lot of it is not going to be harmed by fire. It's like, well, let's start off by making sure the folks down here are cutting their brush. Looks like, figure that most people who live down here probably have some discretionary income. If they can own a massive estancia in the Santa Lucia Mountains, like they probably could afford some brush cutting. A lot of people are on top of it, But the more that we can get our communities fire safe and kind of fire ready, the less that we have to risk firefighter lives to try to do that stuff out ahead of a fire. Oftentimes the strike team shows up on a running and gunning fire, and like they end up cutting a bunch of brush around people's houses and moving their firewood away from their deck and doing all these things that should have been done by the homeowner like at the beginning of summer. But the more we can think about being strategic, like, why would you bother to go cut a bunch of brush up here on this ridge if there's nothing that needs protecting there, And this idea of cutting fuel breaks out ahead of the fire, like sometimes it works, but in a lot of these fuel types, if the fires that you're worried about are going to be spotting like 2 or 3 miles, there's a fuel break's not going to buy you anything. It's going to make it safer for you to get in and out without dying, but fuel breaks are kind of we could just talk about nothing but fuel breaks for a year. We're not going to do that because it's kind of boring. Bonnie's saying she keeps all her brush trimmed, but the neighbors don't. And people don't get it. Like until your house burns down, a lot of people don't perceive of a hazard. It's kind of maddening. It's kind of hard to unsee, but the work is not getting done. And shaming, trying to figure out how to kind of, as a community, incentivize it. Like Firewise is doing some good stuff, but you can become a Firewise community by like doing a few hours of volunteering a year. And in Yuba County, we've seen some Firewise communities that were not defensible at all. And so you see that Firewise sign sometimes, and it's like put up right in front of a lot that's full of dead brush. And so just because you can get a placard that says you're Firewise doesn't mean that your house isn't going to burn down. Red Ryan says he trims the unmaintained easement next to his house. Someone was asking about like getting the county to treat the right of way by your house. As I said yesterday, go weed eat it. Just do it. Don't ask. Don't go cutting their trees. Don't go cutting big bushes. But like, if you can safely go weed eat along the county road next to your house without getting run over, just do it. Just do it every year. Just do it. Just make it normal. Normalize it. And if someone comes out and asks you what you're doing, say, I'm I'm maintaining my defensible space. I need to do this to comply with Public Resource Code 4291. But just like, I think waiting for someone else to come solve the problem. Counties are understaffed. Counties are underfunded. Brush grows every year. It's tedious work. They have higher priorities, and it doesn't get done. And oftentimes, you just have to go do it yourself. And last night I said that, and someone jumped on me and said, well, make sure they don't cut trees on neighbor's property. You can get fined, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, use some common sense. Don't cut down other people's trees. But if there's a vacant lot next to yours, weed eat it. If you've never met the landowner, weed eat it. If you call them and ask them to do it and they won't do it, like, take care of business. Don't wait for anyone else to come to your rescue. The cavalry is not coming a lot of the time. And I know I'll get comments, people saying, oh, you need a permit, or you might hit an endangered butterfly bush. It's like, weed eating is not a crime. But just remember, don't use a chainsaw on a ladder, ever. All right. Yeah, prune the trees. Well, let me see if we can pull up some stuff. You know, we'll put together an episode that's just like kind of straightforward tips on things you can do. Let me look real quick. I keep pulling up my own email here, which I don't really want to do. Not that there's anything incriminating in there. It's pretty boring. But let me see if I can find something real quick that we did. Not that. We'll use Google Street View and take a look at some good and bad landscapes. We'll do it in Yuba County because Street View is really incredible. All right. Bonnie Ann says she'll do a detonation to the channel teaching means donation if we do a special show on Morro Bay. Okay, well, give me a call. You can reach me via the Lookout website. Okay, so here we are in Yuba County, and this is actually this is a driveway to the volunteer fire station. See how these trees are kind of pruned up? Like, that's good. They've kind of come in here and thinned, and they've raised the branches up. They could come back in here and weed eat in here, and that would help. They could take out this madrone. But in general, if you have pine trees, you want them spaced out and you want them pruned up as high as you can reach. Like within 100 feet of your house. So we're in Dobbins here. Okay, so these people... this isn't bad here. Like, it's pretty thick, but they've pruned up under all their trees. Like, if you look at what it looks like where it's not pruned, it's all thick and there's all this kind of undergrowth. But if you look here, they've pruned up under all their trees. That's also a really good start because it helps fires prevent from getting from the ground up into the crowns. So this is Yuba County foothills, and lot of the people there live in these kind of nice meadows, which helps. These people have pruned up their pine trees. They've got some good clearance around their house. When you get a little farther up here, having like a bushy tree under an oak isn't great, and having like this wall of trees here, like you would want to come in here and you'd want to cut all the smaller trees, like smaller than your thigh. And so it's good sometimes like to kind of pick a diameter and say like, I'm going to cut everything smaller than my thigh, and then prune up what's left. And that's often good because those are trees you can kind of cut safely as a non-timber faller. Say, I'm going to cut all these trees that are under 20 or 30 feet tall. You can do it with my little home chainsaw without killing myself. And then you leave bigger trees to someone who knows what they're doing, especially if you're around like power lines where they could fall and hurt something, if they could fall and hurt your neighbor's fence. But oftentimes you can cut smaller trees fairly safely with like a little electric chainsaw. And just pick a size you're comfortable with, like 4 or 5 inches. You can do a lot of good work just thinning small trees. So let's see, you got some more structures here. This neighborhood's kind of funky here. This is one of those neighborhoods that they didn't drive into there. This house, they pruned their trees up, but it's kind of mobile home park. There's a special place in hell for mobile home park owners, because almost always they don't do the work of. You have all these people who live there who don't have any real agency to cut the brush right around their property, and so mobile home parks are often kind of chronically hazardous. These folks have a nice clearance around their house. They've mowed, and so that mowing makes a huge difference. Having a big area you can mow. If this was my place, I would burn this every spring. And it can be fairly safe to do that with a little bit of training and some communication with your volunteer fire department. You have to figure out the air quality and stuff, but you can burn an area like this in the spring once it starts to brown out. It's safer to mow it, of course, but burning's sure a lot more fun. Okay, on this side here, these people have animals. You can tell, because they've got grazed down to the dirt, basically. Oaks are pruned up. That looks pretty good. Oftentimes the problems are if you have a bunch of stuff like your boat right up against your house. All right, so if your house is back behind here, if firefighters can't see your house from the road, they're not very likely to kind of drive back down your driveway that's overgrown, where they have to prune branches to not scratch up their engine. And so one thing to think about with defensible space is you want to make a place inviting to firefighters. If firefighters don't feel like they could safely stay at your house and defend it, they'll go to a place where they feel like they're going to not die. And so that's, having some curb appeal for firefighters to your property is, it's important. Because oftentimes if there's a fire and you've got, 30 fire engines and 50 houses, you have to pick the ones that are most savable. And oftentimes, a lot of them aren't. Those decisions get made pretty easily by the people who have to make them. You can tell here that the Google people, they kind of were advised not to drive down the hillbilly driveways either, because they didn't. You don't see kind of the most interesting stuff here. All right, this place they've done a ton of work. You can tell, because if the people who live here hadn't done a ton of work, it would look like this. All right, this is what this landscape looks like without intervention, and this is what the landscape looks like when you spend all your spare time thinking about fire. One of the reasons here, I think, is that some of this area burned all the structures in the 90s. So people who've been through that tend to be a lot more interested in resilience But in general, if you live in the oaks, you don't want to cut a lot of the trees down because shade's good, and the more you thin it, the kind of scragglier and hotter and drier it gets. But you do want to be able to see through the understory, and you want to make sure that like fire can't get up into those trees. So pruning, pole saw, pruning stuff you can cut from the ground makes more sense than cutting the big trunks of oaks. Oaks in general, if they're not too thick, are pretty fire resistant. Let's jump to a different geography here. We'll go to Shingletown. Just to look a little more at kind of a more forested type. All right, the Destitution Tour continues, Shasta County edition. There's a lot of homes in here, and they're all effed. If your place looks like this and you're wondering why your insurance company dropped you, it's because they looked at Google Street View and they said that place is a loser. This is not a bad start in that they've pruned all their trees up and they clean out the understory, but the problem is that during a big fire, the fire is going to be moving through the crowns of the timber, and there's like twice as many trees here as should be there for fire safety. This isn't bad. If you have oaks, if you live in a place where you're lucky enough to have black oak, keep as many of them as you can. Black oak are awesome. They have a ton of acorns that turkeys eat, deer eat, people eat. They don't burn very well. Black oaks are like one of the least flammable oaks, and they create shade and they block the wind. So if you have a mix of pine and oaks and you're worried about fire, cut down all the pine trees and do favors for the oaks. Because the oaks are really there's probably more oaks here in the past before people who were really interested mainly in like logging and making 2x4s started taking over forestry from the native people. All right, so this place here, all this stuff here that you see is flammable, and a lot of places that look like this, the people have bigger problems than cutting brush, oftentimes. But all this stuff is places embers can land and burn your house down. This neighborhood in general has like 3 times as many trees as it should have. You come into a place like this, you should really cut like almost every other tree. You'd still have a closed canopy. The trees that are still there will be healthier. Oh, this is fun here. We saw this before. This is it's a Firewise community, and they've done a lot of work out here. Since this photography was done, they've done a ton of thinning out here. But I'm just using these photos as an example of. I'm not saying Shasta Forge Village is effed because they just spent a huge amount of money and time and energy to thin it. But I'm using the examples from these photos. So no offense if you live out there. I know you guys are trying. The problem with all this stuff is that it's really hard to get rid of full-size trees. Like, it's expensive, and no one really wants a bunch of pine trees for firewood. And so that in itself makes it almost impossible. One of the kind of another big picture problem with these forested communities is the log markets have been completely saturated in Northern California with burnt trees from salvage for the last decade. And so as long as we keep having huge fires, the mills are all kind of choking on free logs from burned areas. In the past, potentially you could like get together with your neighbors and do a timber sale and sell the trees here that are loggable and like lumber makingable and make enough money at least to pay for the logging. But now like there's really no market. The mills don't want to buy individual truckloads from homeowners. This place looks great here, nice and wide open, trees all pruned up. Like this is about as good as you're gonna get in this kind of thick forest versus the across the street here. Like they've done some thinning and stuff, but way too many trees. And that brings up another point about thinning, is just that these people don't have privacy anymore, right? And so now you got like, and if this guy here cuts his brush, now I got to look at I might have wanted to move to the forest because I don't want to look at my neighbor. I don't want to see what they're doing. I don't want to see them out there at 3 a.m. working on their motorcycle or arguing with their wife or, riding their dirt bike around. And so people like privacy, and when you tell them that that your house needs to look like that place we were just looking at, like a lot of people would rather have fire hazard and privacy than have their neighbor looking in their bathroom window. After you get used to living in a place that looks like this, it's nice, it's private. You don't have to deal with. It's cozy, and people think that this is the way it's supposed to be, and it's not. All right, let's jump to another fuel type. I'm hoping this is useful to y'all. Here's Paradise. Paradise burned in. Paradise burned. The campfire burned this whole area, and you can see now that the whole town got kind of scraped off and is getting rebuilt. But if you go up to Magalia, you can take a street view tour of. You can drive. Let's just take this road, and here we're in the campfire. This area burned. It's all the campfire here. And as we continue up this street, we're going to go into the not campfire. So folks that live on this street have to drive through the campfire every day to go to do anything, and they see what happened. And this is what it looked like. This is what that whole ridge looked like before the campfire, right? So if you see that it looked like this before, and then something really bad happened, and then it looks like this, you'd think that would motivate people to cut their brush. So I'm almost, when you go up here and you drive around Magalia, the areas that didn't burn in a campfire, you realize, well, there's more to it than people, whether or not they understand the hazard or anything else. A lot of people don't have the means to do it. A lot of these neighborhoods are really poor, and there's people living in houses here that their grandma owned, and then their mom lived in, and then they lived in now. It's a lot of work. It's really expensive. It grows right back. And right now it's nice. It's shady. It's a cool place. 362 days out of the year, this place is kind of heaven on earth. And then the wind blows and it's dry and you smell smoke and it's terrible. It's the worst place in the world. So it is true that if your neighbors, this looks pretty good, it's all pruned up and everything, you want to get rid of all this little stuff. All these small little fir seedlings, these pine seedlings, and this stuff, if you do it now, you can go out there with a Pulaski or a axe or a pick, and you can just cut the stuff and make a little pile and burn it in the winter, or put it in your green waste a little bit at a time. But if you wait until it's till all those little seedlings are 20 feet tall, until they look like this, the time to cut stuff is when it's small, because it will be large. This stuff here, you leave this for 5 years, it's going to be this tall. Yeah, someone said a big pair of loppers work for cutting tiny trees pretty fast. Totally. Put on some knee pads, crawl around with some loppers. You can get a lot of good work done. But it's that green curtain, there's a good Magalia kid riding around their dirt bike. At least they got a helmet on. Yeah, you want to get rid of these green curtains. It's not stuff that really is not rocket science. And that's when I say just go do it. I'm not saying come out here and cut down this tree, but I am saying cut down this tree, and yeah. And then we're back in the campfire. The reason that you have to do this stuff is because during the campfire there was no firefighters here. There were power lines down all over Paradise. There was, you had to drive through Paradise, burning Paradise, to get to here. And so a lot of the homes that burned out here, under any other circumstance, would not have burned because you would have had firefighters there doing simple things. You could have put out a lot of these fires that burned these homes here with a garden hose because it was nighttime. The wind had stopped blowing. It was November. It was like 28 degrees out. And a lot of the fire here was just kind of burning through like the leaf litter. But there were no firefighters. It was a complete catastrophe. There were 86 people had just died right down the road, and an entire city was burned, and all the power lines were draped over the roads. And there's just so. But the houses that survived out here were the ones where, if a fire can just kind of trickle through these leaves slowly, and catch your little gutter on fire or something, your house is going to burn down. If you've raked all this stuff up and blown it away, a fire just can't creep right up to your house and catch it on fire. If you have a bunch of stuff on your porch that an ember can land in, if the fire can kind of burn through your wood pile and through your tarp and through your stack of old fence boards that are right up against your house, these are all pathways. These are all what we call exposures, and they all will take your house out. So you really have to plan on, and this boat, this boat's a pathway, an exposure. This tarp catches on fire, the boat catches on fire, it catches the shed on fire, it catches the deck on fire, the deck catches the fence on fire, the fence is attached to this house catches on fire, and on it goes. So those are all what we call exposures, and it's all about kind of reducing exposures. Another big problem is weeds. In Paradise, there was so much soil disturbance in the cleanup that we end out with like broom and all these other really flammable weeds growing all over the place. And that's the kind of stuff that you also, these vacant lots, right now they're enforcing these lot clearance standards that they had before, just because it's on people's radar. But it kills me when I still see a brand new house with a brand new fence, and the fence is like oftentimes attached to the house still. And it's like, well, we know better. We know that you're not supposed to do that anymore. You're supposed to leave a gap. These guys left a little gap. But you still see that driving around Paradise. So it'll be a brand new house and a brand new fence. And the brand new fence is attached to the house. And we know that is an exposure. The weeds catch on fire, the fence catches on fire, it catches your house on fire, and on you go. Are the rumors true about they wanted to burn it because of mineral rights, and it's weird they haven't let people go back? Well, they have let people go back, and no, they didn't burn it for the mineral rights. That didn't happen. There's no mineral rights. Like there's nothing desirable about Paradise for, there's not gold there, there's not cobalt, there's not magnesium. There's a lot of red dirt. It's good dirt for growing trees, but I saw another thing. I saw like someone had a map. Let's see if we can find it here. Let's see. High-speed rail fire map. I saw this map that was like perfect conspiracy theory. It showed like Paradise and the fires, right? It's pretty awesome stuff. They're like, hey, look, everywhere there's fire, here you go, this guy. Sorry. Yeah, craziness. Bit of a coincidence how incredibly lucky for the developers building new high-speed rail that the wildfires almost match exactly the proposed route, clearing the land and making it essentially worthless. It's not true at all. Like these maps don't even line up. So there's a lot of really crazy stuff out there. So don't believe it. Just don't believe anything. Don't even believe me. Just everything's a lie. Sorry, but it is freaking insane. But no, they didn't burn down Paradise for the minerals. Bonnie says, what's the other question? Yeah, no conspiracy rabbit holes. We just don't do it. There's almost always a simple explanation that is not a conspiracy theory for why anything's going on. Paradise was a death trap waiting to happen for 40 years, and sadly it did. All right, yeah, the other question we hear, and Magalia is a good place to talk about it, is about why houses burn but there's still trees there. And let's see if I find that. We'll cover that some other time. Anything else on the canyon fire? As far as I know, the canyon fire is out. Someone got badly hurt, rolled their truck. All right, Bonnie, thanks for asking your questions. Yeah, we don't believe in conspiracy theories for the most part, unless they involve the CIA, and like there's plenty of bad stuff that's happened that is true, but most of the conspiracy theories you hear about fire are just kind of clickbait, in my opinion. Okay, it's been a long time. I'm gonna cut out. Thank you guys for streaming. I gotta play my sponsors, and also I want you guys to check out other stuff on our channel. We've got all kinds of stuff on here that we want you to see. Thanks QTAC, makers of really nice fire equipment. If you got money and want to protect your house, get some QTAC equipment with a water axe pump on it. And if you want to really go for it, get a firebox. These guys are awesome. Good equipment.